You know, when I first arrived, I was trying to reassure myself as a 12-year-old that, you know, I spoke English, I can understand English, I can understand others, and hopefully others can understand me. I didn't dress any differently. Some scholars argue, and it's true, that Americanization in the Philippines begins in the homeland because of the U.S. colonization, and then because of Hollywood movies that have been imported. But I still, you know, I still experience some culture shock. I think I felt different. You know, that was the first time I felt my difference. Whereas in the Philippines, I was just like any others. I felt difference encoded on me for some reason. And so as a young child, I escaped in books and I started reading. And this is probably where my love of literature comes in. For me, that sort of represents not just my love of literature and reading, but also education. I'm the first in my family to get a degree. I was actually much like, was it Antonio Vargas, the Filipino undocumented, quote unquote, undocumented journalist who was brought here as a child. I was also brought here as a child in 1979. And my mother, my sister, and I extended our stay, basically. But we qualified for, I think it was Reagan's Amnesty Act in 1986. So I have a lot of sympathy for the plight of immigrants right now, and the children at our borders. It's so hard to parse out race from gender and sexuality and class, and oftentimes we conflate Filipinos with probably poor migrant workers, perhaps. So I'm never, you know, when people see me for the first time and they don't know me, they can't quite pin me down. So another image that I drew in my body map, for instance, on the lips, I drew elite and privilege and second-hand tongue. So English is a second-hand tongue, even though English was the first language I learned. I learned it at home, and I learned Tagalog in school. But it's also a language of the privileged and the elite. And also, having had the education, in some ways I am more privileged than others. And so just recently, someone asked me, you know, where I'm from, and because we're never at home. We can never be from anywhere in the U.S., right? We're always foreign others. And then somebody made a comment that I speak English so well. So I couldn't respond to this. But yeah, we live in such a visual culture, and so people start to categorize others by what they see, and that's usually the skin color. I know what I can imagine as my, as items that would represent me, and the problem is how it's rendered, right? And so I have this ideal image of the self and how the self is represented, but there's a disconnect, and I'm not a great artist. And it's the same way with language. You know, I'm a much better writer than I am a painter or a drawer or any other artist. I'm a better writer, but at the same time, language can never truly articulate your experience, right? It just fails. So yeah, that was for me the biggest challenge, and also how to pinpoint the self. You know, is this the self? Is this who I am? Because it's always in flux. It's always changing. So to kind of take a static image of the self and say, this is who I am, knowing that this installation won't be installed until, you know, months from now. Would it still be me, right? Because I'm always changing. So that's the biggest challenge. So probably one, that I'm not very artistically inclined, and two, that maybe it's a bit of an existential experience.